What? I'm you, from the future. No time to explain. But have you told them about today's sponsor, Aura? Aura helps protect your information online using such powerful tools as password management, VPN, antivirus software, all rolled into one. They also include a service where they delete your information from data broker websites so they don't have it anymore. Pretty freaking powerful stuff. Data breaches, no longer your problem. I don't understand. What's going on? Did you tell them that they can do it on an individual or a family plan for a good price every single month? Who are you talking to? What about if they sign up right now? They can get a 2-week free trial using aura.com/Nate Narrates, NATENARRATES. Down below. Use the link. Fantastic. I gotta go. See ya. What?
My skull is leaking. Your skull is leaking. My wife was cradling her coffee cup and leaning against the threshold of the door, staring at me with sleepy eyes. I've been up all night editing a report for my job. The report, my job, and other personal details aren't really important. All that I need you to know right now are her words, which she said so casually, as if they had instead been, "You've been up all night." I responded as you'd expect. What? With a chuckle on its heels. She shrugged, walked off, and a few minutes later, I heard the shower run. I dismissed the comment, attributing it to post-sleep mental muddiness, the residual incoherent ramblings of a dream. The day progressed, and neither of us brought up the strange comment. The next day, I was in our living room, connecting a tablet I had bought that morning to the Wi-Fi, when my wife walked past me and said, "Plug up that hole, or you'll drown us all." This, of course, was just as weird, and when I looked at her, I felt especially unnerved because she was dressed in the hoodie and sweatpants she wore while jogging. She hadn't just woken up. I again questioned her, and that time she looked at me with a face full of malice, as if I had been committing a crime, and inquired as to why I should stop. She then walked away, leaving me puzzled and admittedly hurt. Neither of us spoke of it for the rest of the day, and she behaved as if it hadn't even occurred. The third incident is when things became violent. Our power had gone out in a pretty violent storm, and I had set up candles throughout the house. We owned an abundance of them, owed to my wife's love of fruity scents, but only one flashlight. I was sitting on the couch, reading a book on the tablet, when I saw my wife's silhouette standing in the doorway which led into the kitchen. She didn't have the candle I had given her, so I asked if something was wrong. She didn't respond for a while, which unsettled me, though initially because I thought she had hurt herself in the dark. What made me scared, truly uneasy, was her breathing, which was deep and plainly controlled. She'd been restraining herself, quelling some emotion that would have otherwise been bursting forth. After a particularly audible exhalation, she spoke. "If you don't seal up that fucking hole, I will do it for you. God damn it, Alan, I can't swim through all this shit anymore." I had learned from the first two occurrences that responding was pointless, so I just sat there, petrified, while she glared at me through the darkness. But this time, she didn't walk away. Her breathing didn't relax, and still in that crazed state of mind, she said, "Well, are you going to do it, or are you too fucking weak?" I jumped at this, not exactly at the vulgar suggestion, but because for an instant, some fraction of a second, I heard someone else's voice in concert with my wife's. "What the fuck is wrong with you?" I tried not to sound scared, but failed pathetically. My voice trembled, and I was perched on the seat of the couch like a frightened cat. My wife walked towards the coffee table in front of the couch and picked up a long candle I had placed there. Before I could comprehend what she was planning, she had leapt over the table, seized me, and forced me onto my back. When I realized what she intended to do, cauterize the hole in my head, I struggled against her like a madman. But in her enraged state, she'd summoned a strength that impossibly dwarfed my own. She brought the tip of the candle down slowly, so as to not extinguish the flame, and burned my forehead just above my left eyebrow. Despite the size of the flame, the pain was still unbearable, and I begged her to stop. But she just snarled and muttered that I brought it on myself with my procrastination. When she had acceptedly sealed the hole, she dismounted me and returned the candle to its holder on the table. She walked off into the darkness of the hall and did not return for the rest of the night. I regained some of my composure and sat on the couch for the rest of the night, numbed, unthinking, traumatized. The next morning, she asked how it felt, and I told her that I was fine. We ate breakfast, went to our respective jobs, returned home and ate dinner, then watched a show together. It was a normal day. The next incident I can only partially remember. I had been sleeping beside her in our bed, and something in my subconscious, some primal alert of danger, told me to wake up. When I did, I found my wife looking at me, her face full of sorrow. When our eyes met, she said, "You've got more leaks. They're spread all over. I can't close all of these." Then she rolled away from me and placed her head on her pillow. I was about to do the same when she then said this, "I won't let you drown me." And again, I heard that same vocal duality, this time intoned with immense sadness. I got out of bed, put on a jacket, and left the house. Drove to a 24-hour grocery store. I sat in the parking lot, wide awake, while the burn on my head throbbed in remembered agony. At this point, you're probably wondering why I didn't go to the authorities and report the domestic violence, especially considering the suggestion of more. I'll get to that in a minute. When dawn arrived, I returned home, and upon seeing me, my wife casually asked, "Did you find what you were looking for?" I called her a bitch and got in the shower, locking the door beforehand, of course. I brought my clothes into the bathroom with me, something I didn't usually do, just because I didn't want to traverse the halls while so plainly vulnerable. She had said that I had leaks all over, and I didn't want to risk so much bodily exposure. I decided to Google the things she had said and found nothing of relevance to me or our lives. I considered that she was just insane, suffering from some randomly emergent psychosis, or some other illness of the mind which caused her to see leaks in people. I even considered that I was the one with which something was wrong, even going so far as to examine myself for tiny holes. I, of course, found none. I decided that I'd try to anticipate the exact moment she acted, and try to restrain her, then interrogate her about what was going on. The results of this interrogation, I reasoned with myself, would influence my decision on whether or not I went to the authorities, or simply contacted a psychiatrist. I didn't have a chance to stop her when it finally happened. I was in the living room. The open space was a comfort, compared to our bedroom. Applying some ointment to my wound, and even the softest touch elicited a pain that made me wince. When my eyes closed for just a second, I felt an arm wrap around my neck, and my wife's breath in my ear. She pinned me against her and fell back onto the couch, so that I sat forced against her lap. In her other hand was a knife, which she sank into my stomach. My hands had immediately shot to the arm around my neck, but I was powerless to relieve the vice. When the blade entered my flesh, I tried to push away her hand, but was again met with insurmountable resistance. "See how it spills out of you? You're such a mess. I've been stepping in puddles all day." If you thought my wife's bizarre behavior was terrifying, I'm sure you can imagine my horror at seeing nothing come out of my body. As the knife slowly, painfully carved up my abdomen, no liquid escaped the wound. "Disgusting, isn't it? How it just gushes out? You're lucky I care so much. Anyone else wouldn't have bothered with bloodletting." There was mockery and self-assuredness in her voice, and the other voice, which before had been barely audible beneath her own, was now just as prominent. I don't remember anything else about that day, beyond the moment I came to the next day, sitting on a lawn chair in my brother's backyard. He lived 45 minutes away, by car, and I hadn't taken my car. I examined myself, saw my still open, still bloodless wound, and panicked. My brother heard me screaming and took me to the emergency room. I didn't answer his battery of questions, and I didn't answer the staff's questions either. They sewed me up. My brother went and brought back my wife. She hadn't been answering calls, and she arrived with all the worry and shock you'd expect of her, as if she hadn't been responsible for the wound. The weirdest thing? The really fucking unreal part is that at some point, I had started bleeding. Just gushing the stuff. So neither my brother nor the hospital staff saw what I had seen. It was a normal wound for them. The police were, of course, contacted, not at my request, but due to the nature of the wound, it was at least obvious that I had been stabbed, that a blade had been inserted and drawn up my gut. The burn mark on my forehead was still plainly visible as well. I didn't even hint at my wife's responsibility. I was still too freaked out by the bloodless wound and wanted to question her, privately, even more than before. The police had no evidence which would suggest it was my wife's fault. They never found any blood-stained blade when I relented to their request to search the home. I went from total silence to, "I don't remember," which was responded to with, "We can protect you if you tell us what happened." My wife expectedly feigned innocence, and eventually the police withdrew their insinuations and questions. I returned home the next day with my wife, and she looked after me like a saint. She didn't ask how I got the wound. She behaved as if she already possessed that knowledge, and it somehow was of no emotional distress for her. For a week, she didn't mention any leaks or holes or fractures or fissures which poured forth something, yet which actually let loose nothing. And while I didn't forget what had happened, I thought we had finally moved past it. I had abandoned my desire to ask questions, for fear of reigniting the mania, the ire. Shortly after that brief return to normality, my wife came running into me, soaking wet, crying now she was leaking. Initially, I thought it was some morbid joke, that she had decided to fuck with me and drenched herself. But something about the way she was wet, the appearance of the liquid, was uncanny. Unlike water in some way I can't describe, beyond that it just looked too wet. In some lizard-brained way, I sensed that the water was inimical. "Please help me," she whimpered this over and over as she buried her head in my chest. I didn't know what to do, and something about the damned wetness repulsed me. I gripped her by the shoulders, looked in her eyes, and asked her everything I had wanted to ask for the last month. What did she mean that I was leaking? Why, when she stabbed me, did I not bleed? How was she leaking? Was she crazy? Was I? It all came out, and at some point my voice had risen to thunderous shouting. She eventually pulled away from me, still sobbing, and fell to her butt on the floor. "It's all over. They can't patch me up. You certainly can't. I'll burst and drown in myself." Her voice was hoarse, her eyes redder than the blood that should have spilled from my gut a week before, and her whole body shook in disconcerting spasms. I didn't know what to do, how to console her, and a part of me didn't even care. It was my wife, sure, but she had also nearly eviscerated me, and afterwards acted like she had done me a favor. I did the only thing I could do. I left. Didn't pack anything, didn't linger any longer in that house than I had to. I grabbed my phone, keys, wallet, and jacket, and drove away to my brother's house. I live with him now. It's been 3 days. I haven't heard from my wife or the police, and my brother assumes my stay with him is due to me finally building up the courage to let her go, to free myself of her abuse. He hasn't the faintest idea of the truth. Although, I can't say I have all the facts either. Yesterday, while my brother and I were organizing some stuff in the garage to make room for my car, I noticed that his skin seemed distinctively damp. I thought it at first to be sweat, but it was late fall, and the garage was considerably cool, and neither of us had exerted ourselves enough to warrant perspiration. But still, I could see little beads of liquid on his arms, streaks of something trailing down the sides of his face. I didn't mention it to him, and he didn't say anything either. Earlier today, as I was making breakfast, I stepped in a puddle of water. I assumed it had been from the sink, or perhaps that I had spilled a bit of water when I went to fill up the coffee maker. But something about the puddle felt wrong. Felt too wet. And as I considered this, I thought that my skin felt unusually porous. I hadn't showered yet, but I felt so, for the lack of a better word, permeable. I don't know what any of it means, if it means anything at all, but I think that at some point later today, I should go back home and visit my wife. My vision has become almost imperceptibly altered, as if I'm submerged in eerily clear water, and everything sounds dull, delayed, and strangely distant. Yes, I think I will visit my wife. And that was My Skull is Leaking by WeirdBryceGuy. Yet another fantastically strange story by WeirdBryceGuy. This one immediately called out to me because, I mean, the title alone is just what the fuck? You know what I mean? My skull is leaking. And I didn't really know where the story was going to go. I like the fact that there's so much bizarreness to it, right? The fact that this one guy's skull is leaking. He's not aware of it. He has no awareness of anything abnormal. His wife is completely attuned to it, and she has to seal up the holes. But what causes the holes, and what's coming out of the holes? Because when she eventually stabs him and guts him and stuff like that, and he's bleeding but not bleeding, it really makes you wonder. It definitely sounds like there's some kind of a psychological problem, right? But I mean, I don't know enough about psychology to really know if this is something that you could easily explain. I mean, I suppose that the first thoughts in my mind is you're having a level of hysteria, some kind of hallucinations. But the fact that it affected more than one person, but in different ways, I find that interesting. Is this something that perhaps is not just in the mind? Is this perhaps something that it affects their vision in a bizarre way? Maybe there's a brain parasite, for example, and it's doing something which allows one of them to see what's really going on and the other one not entirely. I don't know. What would cause holes in a person's body? And yet again, is it mainly the skull? Is it mainly the head is where the holes are? Because it sounded like at one point it could just be kind of anywhere. I don't know. It's very interesting. I like the fact it gave me a lot of chances to kind of really think about it. I don't really have any answers. I'd like to hear your opinions though, so definitely let me know what you think in the comments down below. Always excited to see those. Thank you so much for being here with me. I've changed a little bit of my setup. Just see if I can get the microphone closer to me to make it kind of sound a little nicer, and I've tweaked some settings and stuff like that. Let me know how it went. Let me know what you think. This will probably be the first video where I'm going to try doing a different visual format as well for the story reading. So let me know as well what you think about that. Let me know your feedback, how I can tweak things to make things more appealing for obviously you guys, because I'm happy to do a lot of these things. I am doing a lot of it myself. Well, I'm not doing a lot of it. I'm doing all of it myself, and it's, as you can imagine, it's a lot of a learning process, and I'd love to be able to hire other people to assist me and to maybe have an editor, things like that kind of stuff. But I'm not making enough money out of this yet to warrant those things just yet, which is a shame because I'd love to be able to actually make this a proper business, you know what I mean? But it's early days, isn't it? We're trying to grow, we're trying to get there. Anyway, I'm rambling, sorry. This has been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed myself. I sure hope you have too. We'll see you for whatever's next. Take care.